Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for joining us at what is certainly going to be a most fascinating Chancellor's Colloquium. I'm Don Roth. I'm the Executive Director here at the Mondavi Center for the Performing Arts here at UC Davis. And before I introduce Chancellor Gary May, let us take a moment to acknowledge the land on which we are gathered. For thousands of years, this land has been the home of Patwin people. Today, there are 3 federally recognized Patwin tribes: Cachel-Dehee Band of Wintun Indians of the Calusa Indian Community, Quetzal-Dehee Wintun Nation, and Yocha-Dehee Wintun Nation. The Patwin people have remained committed to the stewardship of this land for many centuries. It has been cherished and protected as elders have instructed the young through generations, and we are honored and grateful to be here today on their traditional lands. Before the colloquium begins, please look around and locate the nearest exit, and that's the exit through which you came. If you have a mobile device with you, please silence it, and also please wear your mask and make sure it covers your mouth and nose to provide effective protection. It is now my distinct honor to introduce the Chancellor of UC Davis, Gary S. May. Thank you. Yeah, that's good. And he's not even here yet. Under his leadership during this pandemic, UC Davis has been nationally recognized model for how a university can help keep not only its campus, but the surrounding community safe. He's a national leader in engineering, in education, and in promoting diversity at institutions of higher education, work for which President Obama, among others, has recognized him. The Chancellor's colloquia under his leadership have provided deep and rich and stimulating conversations for our campus and our community. Today's gathering is certain to continue that tradition. It gives me great pleasure to welcome to the stage the 7th Chancellor of UC Davis, Gary S. May. There you are.
Thanks, Don. Thank you, Don. Thank you for being here, everyone. We're sorry we were just a few minutes delayed. Turns out that traffic doesn't care if you're president, so, but here we are. It certainly feels good to have the colloquium in the Mondavi Center once again. Zoom is fine, but nothing beats a live audience. And I've been looking forward to this particular panel. The Distinguished Speaker Series was created to generate conversations with some of the most thoughtful and creative minds of our times. And today we have a unique opportunity to hear from those who have led and continue to lead the University of California, the greatest public university in the world. The UC system encompasses 10 campuses and enrolls more than 285,000 students. It's at the forefront of research that addresses our most pressing challenges while providing a world-class education that empowers students with knowledge and skills that transforms their lives. I know we're going to cover a lot of ground in this discussion, from the current issues of the day to broader thoughts on the value of a public university and what it takes to lead a system like this. So now let me introduce our panelists. The first panelist I'd like to introduce is Mark Yudof. He served as University of California president from 2008 to 2013. He was selected by Time Magazine in 2009 for its list of best college presidents, noting his work providing access and opportunities for low-income students. Prior to his tenure at UC, he was chancellor of the University of Texas System and president of the University of Minnesota. He's also a law professor who specializes in the fields of constitutional law and freedom of expression. Please welcome Mark Yudof. Next, I'd like to welcome Janet Napolitano. Janet served as UC president from 2013 to 2020. She came to this post as former Secretary of Homeland Security and former governor of Arizona. While leading the University of California, Janet was known for her support of undocumented students and worked to diversify the system's graduate students and postdoctoral researchers. She also hired me. Nobody's perfect. She earned her undergraduate degree from Santa Clara University and her Juris Doctorate from the University of Virginia School of Law. Please welcome Janet Napolitano. And finally, I'd like to welcome the current president of the University of California, Michael Drake. Michael was selected as the UC president in July of 2020, following his time as president of the Ohio State University. He also served for 9 years as chancellor of UC Irvine and as a previous vice president for health affairs for the UC system. President Drake was a longtime professor of ophthalmology at UC San Francisco, where he earned his medical degree. He was raised in nearby Sacramento, where he learned to play guitar and worked at the original Tower Records. In fact, he was appointed to the 2015 to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and Museum Board. So, please welcome my boss, President Michael Drake. Let me have a seat. So thanks again so much for the three of you being here with us today. Before we get started, I'll give you a chance to say any brief remarks you'd like to make before we start with the questions. But we'll start with Mark.
I just want to thank you, Gary, for inviting all of us, particularly the old-timers. For those of you who are worried, I am COVID-free as of an hour ago. and I do miss my friends here. And Michael was not only a wonderful campus chancellor at Irvine, but I also got 3 free ophthalmological advice. So I definitely miss Michael, and more Brenda Moore. But
I don't understand.
Janet?
Well, I too want to thank you, Gary, for having us all here on the same stage together. It's quite a pleasure. It's good to see some old friends. I'm at Berkeley now, so I'm not outside of the UC system, but I'm outside of the office of the president, and I have very fond memories of my time in that position. And I think you may be one of my best hires ever.
Oh, very kind of you. Please repeat that at dinner when my wife is present. And Michael.
Great to be here. Great to see so many friends, actually old friends in a couple of ways, friends who I've worked with for so many years and friends who I've worked with from when I was a chancellor and you were my boss. So it's great to be back here with you and have you together. And I will marvel at, when you look at my little introduction, there are little things here and there that I worked for decades for, the national academies and things like that. But the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, which I just pay money to be on that board, I mean, it gets me, it gets me the greatest applause. So I note that and know it's important in the world.
Well, we may ask you to play your guitar later.
Anytime when you get what you pay for.
All right, let's get the conversation going with the first question. And this is for all of you. All of you had the distinguished honor of leading the 10-campus University of California system. Can you just talk a little bit about your background and how you came to the university and to former presidents, Yudof and Napolitano? Could you tell us what you're doing now?
Well, I've stood up for some radical aspirations. I'm for academic freedom. I'm for freedom of expression. I'm not too hot on racism or anti-Semitism, but it's controversial in some circles. I'm seeing a physical trainer. I explained to her that the word sadist has an I in it, and that would be me. And I try to catch up on my reading and to read about what Michael Drake is doing.
So I came to the University of California from a somewhat non-traditional route. I had been, as Gary mentioned, I'd been in politics in Arizona as the Attorney General, was the governor, and then went to D.C. to be a member of President Obama's cabinet. And he asked me to stay through the second term, and I thought, boy, 8 full years as Secretary of DHS, that's a lot. And so I told the president I could do maybe one more year, and and then I got to thinking, what would I like to do with my next chapter? And when I had been governor, I had always enjoyed working on issues about higher ed because you could see the impact so immediately. You could see the impact on students, you could see the impact on communities. And I thought, running a small college back west, that sounds great. And literally 2 weeks later, I got a call from a headhunter who said, the University of California is looking for a new president, and they're willing to entertain non-traditional candidates. And I said, well, does that mean somebody from outside of academia? And they said, yeah, that's what non-traditional means. Anyway, so I went through the process, was offered the position, and stepped down at the beginning of September of 2013, and by the end of September, was out in Oakland at the office of the president hearing new terms that were unfamiliar to me, like shared governance and things of that sort. So that is how I made my way to the University of California. Now I'm a professor at the Goldman School of Public Policy at Berkeley. I'm teaching a course currently on security and climate change. I taught a course last fall. It was a general survey course on security policy. And we've established a new center there, the Center on Security in Politics, looking at a variety of those issues that affect us all today. So I'm having a grand time.
Great. Yeah, thank you.
Great. Me, it's sort of one foot in front of the other. Born in New York, moved to Sacramento when I was in third grade, and I began at community college in Sacramento. I went to McClatchy High School in Sacramento, and I was a little younger when I finished than in the way things worked in those days, and went to a community college down the street from our house, transferred to Stanford, went to UCSF for medical school with the full intention of hanging up a shingle and being a self-respecting medical doctor of some kind. And I was introduced to the concept of academic medicine and research and teaching as well as clinical care really as a young person there, and I enjoyed so much being a part of the university community. That was a new pathway that was opened to me. Actually, wonderfully by mentors who had more time than seemed reasonable to talk to me in the afternoon when I was 23 about what I might want to do as life went forward. And then I followed those examples and then became a professor at UCSF, working actually with some of you in the audience during those days, and it was great. I loved being a part of this university. Hadn't expected to move to anything broader. I planned out a 30 or 40-year life, as a professor. But then when the chance came to join the president's office as a vice president, that was something I thought would be fun to do and something new. And so I moved over across the bay while keeping research and teaching and a small patient practice in San Francisco. Was there 5 years. And during that time, working with your predecessors, got a chance to see what the broader university vision might be, and became more interested in doing things like that, but without any aspiration to change. And then the opportunity came up to be a chancellor, and I arrived then back on a campus, an undergraduate campus, really for the first time since I was 20 years old, but jumped in, began to swim, and had a great time at Irvine. And then that led to connections with the broader higher education community. And at about the time we were thinking of stepping down and kind of rolling out, a call came from Ohio State to try moving to America, and which we thought would be a great adventure, and had a wonderful, special time. There's something we weren't expecting, but it was great to see the country from a different perspective, and also to see the University of California from a different perspective. And I'd appreciated that, I thought, from the inside, but looking from the outside, and really being able to silently really kind of glow with the position and the respect that the University of California held among public higher education in this country. Really made me proud secretly all the time. And then we thought we would then decrescendo and relax a little bit, to take sabbatical. And that was the plan. It would have been the plan 2 years ago today, for sure. And then really, you know, about 51 weeks ago or 50 weeks ago, we began to deal with COVID and went into lockdown, and then had conversations during the lockdown with UC about returning in a more active role than we had planned. And as I've said, it just didn't seem like a time to be on the sidelines, so we decided to hitch up and take another lap or two, and here we are.
All right, great. So during your times as UC president, all of you prioritized initiatives that focused on student access and affordability, and appropriately so. Talk about why that's such an important issue for you and for the UC, and what additional steps we should be taking as a society now to make higher education even more accessible and affordable.
Well, I'll start. During the 7 years or so I was president, we only raised in-state tuition once, and that was by 2%. But every year there was a tuition issue. Why? Because the university is a personnel-dependent entity, and you have to pay personnel more every year, and that means your costs are going up, and those costs need to be covered. So kind of figuring out how to do that while keeping tuition as low as possible and maintaining the excellence of the institution is really the challenge that falls to the presidency. And then, of course, you have the issues with the legislature and with the governor. Will they provide the university with the assets it needs to be able to continue to thrive while keeping tuition low? One of the little-known facts about the University of California is how financial aid works, so that a third of every tuition dollar goes right back into student financial aid. And what that amounts to is that literally half the students graduate with no debt. And those that graduate with debt, I'm talking about the undergraduates now, the average total amount is around $20,000, which, sounds like a lot of money, but it's really the price of a small car. And cars depreciate in value the minute you drive them off the lot. I think a university degree appreciates over the course of one's lifetime. But I think the struggle is to keep student debt as low as possible, because I think even the fear of debt is a deterrent to accessibility. Sure. It's a public university, and it needs to really have that public impetus and that public ethos. And so balancing all of these things is the challenge.
Sure. Please.
I come out this, in maybe not an unusual way, but access and affordability are important because, in my view, a democracy should not have a permanent underclass, particularly one identifiable by race or religion or ethnicity or immigration status or any of that stuff. I don't expect everyone will succeed. We're not all equal in all our talents and so forth, but I do expect that you not be penalized for where you're born or who you are when you're born. So, and in achieving that goal, I agree with Janet. The set-asides for scholarships and all are critically important. And one of the things I worked on that I was proud of was the Blue and Gold program, where I don't know what it's up to today, but it was $65,000 or $75,000. I learned in South Texas that certainty was very important to poor families. And if you could say you were going to get financial aid if your income tax return is below this level, that was part of the discussion at the dining room table. And to me, that was really important. And the only other remark I'd make today is I think we need to work this problem. I think in an ideal world, when we send out a letter of acceptance, we would send out an award of scholarship to that person. you wouldn't have to wait 6 weeks or 8 weeks or whatever it is. I don't know the exact time frame now. But it is so important that you're trying to figure out, and many people are trying to reach, maybe their relatives haven't gone to college, maybe the discussions at the supper table, and you don't know whether you can afford the XYZ institution. The clearer and the earlier you are, the more successful you'll be recruiting those students. So to me, that should be the next step in higher education.
Yeah.
A couple of things. I'd say first agree with my colleagues, and access, affordability, and excellence are things that we want to tie together. And I've said many times we don't want to buy one or the other at the expense of the third, so it really is all three together. It may be a little contrarian sounding, but we've this summer voted to have a cohort tuition plan that raises tuition for incoming cohorts and then holds it steady for 6 years. I supported that enthusiastically. I think it's the affordability is what we're looking for, not low price per se. There are people like the chancellor's children and others, but mine not to be silly, who can afford to pay much more than the tuition is, and holding the price artificially low to subsidize high-income families, to me, is misplaced. And so I think it needs to be appropriate, because as President Napolitano was saying, as we raise more tuition, we actually have more money that goes into financial aid, actually lowering the debt burden on those lower income families for whom even our low tuition is too high. So the goal is to get to a place where there's a debt-free pathway for all of our students. We think we can get there in 5-ish years from now, so that $20,000 is affordable, much more affordable than the national average of about $30,000, a little bit more, but we want that to go down to lower. You'll have to work a little bit, maybe but 12, 15 hours a week, something like that, in a job that helps with your educational development. But the concept will be that anyone could step on the campus with not a dime and expect to graduate in 4 years not owing a dime if they put that effort into it. Families that have more that they can contribute can help to mitigate that, but we'd like there to be a debt-free pathway for everyone. I'll say that to Mark's comment, the Blue and Gold plan is now at $80,000 a year. Families making under $80,000 don't pay tuition. About 57% of our California admittees pay zero tuition today. So if people come up to me and say, gosh, I was a student at the University of California, and it was $250 a semester. Some of the people in this audience look as though that would be something. I won't make any eye contact. But when I started medical school, it was $250 a quarter, and that was great. What we can say now to freshmen who come in from 57% of our freshmen, it's not that much. It's less than $250 a semester because it's zero, and we want to continue to make that pathway there. The thing that we experienced, I think, if I can, during President Udall's time when we came out with the Blue and Gold plan, is that people couldn't believe it enough. We shared it over and over and over again, and there'd be people who would lie down on the tracks because tuition was too much, and their tuition was zero. And then the same people would lie on the tracks if we raised tuition, even though the increased return to aid would decrease their cost of attendance because their financial aid package would increase, and they were already paying zero. But we worked through those things to get a plan approved by the regents last summer that will increase financial aid starting in the fall and try to make us even more affordable to a greater range of people.
Very exciting plan, by the way. I'm going to switch gears to a topic that is on all of our minds and has been for the past 2 years, and that's COVID-19. And by the way, all 4 of us have had rapid tests right before we came on stage, because I know the pictures will go out and somebody will comment about our lack of masks. So I'm just getting the social media team ready. The question is, the pandemic, now entering its 3rd year, has upended many industries and sectors, and how do you think this crisis will change higher education in the long term?
You start.
Well, I start first and say that among things that we're most pleased about when we look back over the past 2 years is the way that our campus communities have responded to this sort of existential crisis, this incredible pandemic. Davis and Healthy Davis together has really been a model city for that, so applause to all of you for that work you've done. You've avoided hospitalizations, but actually literally saved people's lives by being a good community and working together, which we're really proud to see and proud to be a part of. if we look at our campuses, if we just took our campus communities and put them all together, we would have among the lowest rates of COVID fatality in the world. We wish that that could be true for everyone, but it really shows how we focused on that. So we're really pleased about the way everyone has come together to do that. Saying that, we're totally sick of it, and ready to move forward, and encouraged by the last few weeks and wanting to continue to work forward these next few. We've learned a couple things. One, that public health science, we've been able to experience that public health science matters and makes a difference and really can save lives. So that's been important. We've also thought about novel ways of delivering educational content, and we want to try to learn from the forced experiment of the ways that we've done things these last couple of years to things that we can do to improve educational delivery in the future, and we'll continue learning in that sphere.
Yeah, so I was serving as president when COVID hit, and in March of 2020, my chief of staff came in and said, we're going to have to vacate the building. The mayor is locking down the city. And I said, well, for how long? A week, 2 weeks? Anyway, so he moved over to my residence and set up my office. I had a long dining room table, and I worked at one end, and my executive assistant was more than 6 feet away. It was a long table, but at the other end, and that's where we ran the university from. And the campuses had to immediately depopulate the dorms. The faculty had to immediately switch to remote teaching. And it was like overnight. And in the meantime, our hospitals were turning into COVID hospitals, and anything non-COVID related was canceled or postponed. And all of this had a lot of budgetary impact, and so we were working our way through that as well. I think that lessons learned from COVID for higher ed. One is public health really matters, and when you're running a college campus, it's a community, and using the best public health science that you can really counts. Counts in number of fatalities, counts in number of hospitalizations, counts in innumerable ways. The second is that we've become better at remote teaching, and I think we've learned that remote teaching, particularly for some courses in some disciplines, works pretty well, and is a way to increase accessibility. Does it totally substitute for being in the classroom? No. And I think that's the third thing we've learned, which is the value of being able to be physically in a classroom with a faculty member, with your fellow students, and the like. So will remote teaching totally go away once we're through the pandemic? I do not think so. But I think we've become much more sophisticated in terms of the nuances of where it's best deployed.
Well, I've learned that as a constitutional lawyer, I'm glad I'm not heading a university today. Every one of them is a chief epidemiologist. Now, fortunately, the chief really is a real physician here, which I think is fortunate. And you have Mary Krogan here as the provost, and she's the person you want to advise you on these matters. And I don't know where it's all going to go. I think it's been a very difficult time for higher education, worse than the Great Recession. Maybe not quite as much turmoil as the Vietnam era, but turmoil. And I would just say that universities will change. There'll be hybrid universities like Janet has described, partly online and Zoom and partly in person. But I think the workplace has changed. And I met with a friend at Berkeley, and her group goes in, I think it's 2 days a week, and is at home 3 days a week. A lot of those jobs can be done at home. So then the question, I guess, for you, Gary, is how do you preserve the sense of community when people are only there some of the time for classes, some of the time in the library, some of the time in the laboratory or whatever. I mean, the medical staffs, I think, they have a different sort of environment. They may be there 20 hours a day, but so it's going to change universities, but will there be a loss of community? I just don't know. I tend to think we're adaptive, but I don't know how this will all work out.
Yeah, I'm not sure either. A couple of you mentioned remote learning. There was a poll conducted last year by AAU, and it found that a significant number of Americans, about 4 out of 10, were skeptical that a college degree is worth the time or the money. Can you talk about your perspective on the value of a degree, particularly in this era of remote learning?
I could.
Please.
I'll ask. We're old enough to have watched What's My Line, right? When we would all try to get up. But how many people here think that a college education is worth it? Just raise your hands if you could. Gosh, it seems like more than 40% to me, and so I would say that 40% aren't people who are alumni or faculty or staff at the University of California. I think we have an incredibly valuable enterprise. We have more applicants this year than we've ever had in our history, 250,000 applicants for undergraduate admission to the University of California for next year, more diverse applicant pool than we've ever had in the past, up 22% among African Americans and 12% among Latino applicants this last year. So there are more people thinking more about coming to the University of California today than ever before in our history. And we think that the value of the university really is clear to overwhelming numbers of people, and we're very, very proud of that. There are others who aren't planning to go to college, don't have the opportunity, or don't know so much about the things that we might do, who might have a different opinion. But I think that the popularity and the importance of institutions like ours is, in fact, widely appreciated and recognized.
Yeah, I would agree with Michael. And by the way, the data supports that. I mean, if you look at the data carefully, I mean, the rate of return on an investment in college, it does depend on your major. If you're into 14th century anthropology, it probably isn't as good as an MBA, just to speculate. But I do think there's a return. But what I would say is, and this is how universities may change, I think the whole credentialing process is going to have to undergo some change. I think business schools are going to give more certificates and not necessarily 2-year MBAs. I think, frankly, I taught law school for many years. I bored generations of students. But it probably could get done in 2 years. And so I think, and the electronic, online revolution sort of accelerates that. So I think we're going to have to make some changes about how we view degree programs and what counts as a credential. And that may be part and parcel. But having said that, I think these credentials are important to advancing in the world. And by the way, I don't want to be crude about it. I mean, you probably will make more money, but you'll probably live longer. You'll vote more often. There are other things. You'll know more about culture and art and the history of the country, the history of religion, philosophy. Those are important things, too.
Sure.
Yeah, I have to chime in because one of the best years of my life was my 3rd year of law school. Not because I was studying, but I had a terrific time. And I agree with what both of my colleagues have said. I think also there needs to be some thought given to the different types of higher education institutions. So the for-profit higher education industry is really the source of a lot of these horror stories you hear about students graduating with debt in the high 6 figures who can't get a job and don't actually end up with an actual degree. And so I think differentiating. And one of the great things that the United States has contributed to the world is the notion of large land-grant public universities that are research universities and teaching universities that are broadly open to the populace. And that has been a real contribution of the United States to the world.
For sure. Now, the pandemic has taken place alongside a national conversation about race and injustice and policing and in our society. What do you think universities and educational leaders what role can we play in building solutions or leading us towards solutions, fostering understanding about these issues? And is there something that we can be doing better in this space?
I think you're up, Mark. You get to go first.
I don't know, I probably, the least informed about this. You're doing a lot, and I've watched the University of California under Janet and Michael's leadership. I think you did a great deal, and some of it's financial, and some of it's tone, and some of it's, equity and inclusion. I mean, there are all sorts of things that are happening. I don't think you can underestimate the importance. I guess, excuse me, the moral leadership is very important to me. Mm-hmm. I'm a big believer in, free speech, academic freedom, but I'm also, also a believer that the president has an obligation to speak out when terrible things are said. This is really choking me up, so I think I'll turn it over to...
Well, I think, these fundamental questions, the role of policing and law enforcement, the role of racism and sexism, and the other isms that we have in our country, and the role that each of us plays in trying to make the country better and to educate the next generation to make the country better. There's that educational function is really one of the centers of the university and should be one of the centers of the university. And the university, and particularly a university like the University of California, ought to take on some of the big issues of the day. It should take on a leadership role on issues like climate change, on issues like policing, on issues like racism, and it should engender discussion, debate, dialogue, but at the forefront, it should be thinking about how do we prepare the next generation to deal with these issues.
I agree, of course, and Janet started the Center for Free Speech, and Mark, you've been a scholar in this area for decades. It's very, very important, and the university has a proud legacy of. I was in the chancellor's office at Berkeley a little bit ago, and they have lots of photographs on the wall, and all of them are for 50 years ago, from back in the day. So that was really a moment where the university was able to live its values in a very public and historic way, and it's something that I think is a part of who we are today. So we try to be a platform for that speech. I always thought that we were like the ring for a boxing match. We're not the referee, we're not the combatant, but we're the place, the venue for these things to happen, and we want to try to encourage that, so it's an important part of our legacy. We've wanted to, I arrived in August of 2020, and so we were dealing with the beginning of the pandemic, but also in the outcry after the murder of George Floyd, and we wanted it to be not the same as the last times that these things had happened, when there was a great deal of energy, and the energy would last until the energy was gone, and then things were about the same as they were before. So we wanted to try to capture some of that energy and plug it into the way we were doing business, and imagine a safer and more inclusive future in which there was diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging maybe as a part of the experience of our community. And so we thought a lot, and we're thinking a lot about safety, campus safety and how we imagine campus safety. Again, kudos to Davis as a leader among our campuses and many of the things that we're doing to try to change the way that looks. And then I'll just look at the diversity on the stage, maybe a little more diversity on the stage than the audience, but I'll look at the diversity on the stage and say that when I sit around with my friends or sitting around with friends like Gary, and we were to talk about our interactions with police over the years, all of us have stories, and it's plural stories of things that sound strange to people who haven't grown up in a life where that was normal. And we wanted to get to a place where I wanted to try to help us get to a place where that's less common, where we wouldn't expect that your interactions with the police could be determined by looking at you, or your past interactions couldn't be determined immediately by looking at you. And so we're looking very much at trying to be an exemplar of best practices in community safety, keeping ourselves safe, being able to extend respect broadly to all members of our community, and moving forward.
COVID-19 and social justice are just two of many issues that we're facing in this 21st century. You could also talk about challenges like climate change and food insecurity and political instability and on and on and on. How are universities like the UC making a difference on these issues, and what can we do to continue to adapt to respond to future challenges?
I should say the reason I came to the University of California was I didn't really need another job, particularly one that challenging, but I felt this is the best public university in the world, and they're doing research, whether it's how to build bridges or whether it's how to deal with epidemics or how to cure various diseases, and not to mention the arts and all the rest of it. So I think universities can contribute to all these things. I mean, a lot of what happens in the world, I mean, take the vaccines and all that, is based upon basic research. I mean, there's a Nobel laureate at Berkeley. She did fabulous work in this area. Someone has to do it, and it takes a particular sort of person and a particular sort of institution. And it's not likely to come out of the private sector. It can, but it's not that usual. You know that from Georgia Tech, Gary. So it's extremely important that we provide the leadership. At the same time, I just want to add that universities, not everyone's going to agree with you. Some of the Nobel laureates are outliers, you know, and some people may not agree with every aspect of the climate change movement or any other movement. We need to accommodate those people. We can't shut them down. We need to do the research. We need to find the facts. We need to get it right. But we have to understand that part of growing up into an adult and part of our contribution as a university is having some diversity of opinion, having heterogeneity of opinion, just as we have heterogeneity in terms of race and ethnicity and all the rest of it.
Cacophonous applause.
You know, I actually, so I've spent a lot of my adult life thinking about questions about security and threats to people, threats to property, but really what I've been thinking a lot about is threats to our democracy. How do we as a society deal with the plethora of disinformation that has spread across the country, has infected our politics, our governance, and so forth. And I don't think we have a good handle on that at all. I don't think we understand how people receive information, how they process information, how they act on information. You know, for a cultural democracy like ours to survive and to thrive, we need to figure out where our commonality lies, and we need to be able to arrive at that in a thoughtful way that allows for our differences, but also allows for a common understanding about what it means to be an American. And so I think, when I think about a role of a great public university, I think one of its roles is to take on some big questions like that and examine it from all angles, from the basic sciences to the social sciences to the arts and humanities, and to really grapple with how we deal with what I actually think is the greatest threat to the United States today.
As you were both speaking, I was thinking of Clark Kerr's comment that knowledge makes the world go round, and the university is still the best place for new ideas. Mm-hmm. And I think that's true. I think that that's our knowledge is our central product, and our job is to try to produce that and then to help disseminate that in ways that allow the world to move forward. And that's very exciting. You know, Mark, you said you weren't didn't need a new job. I was actually not wanting another job, to be quite honest. And the job paid considerably less than my sabbatical was going to pay, to be honest. That was a conversation in the bathroom with Mrs. Drake, who said, "How much is this going to cost us?" As was the quote. And I said, "Oh, I can't remember." But the opportunity to come back and work with the incredible people that we have at this university was something that was something that couldn't be. It was an offer that couldn't be refused, and really we're thrilled to be able to come back and join our colleagues and to try to continue being a part of this moving forward. And so it's been a great pleasure, and to see the things that have happened in the past and the place that we're going and the concept of those things that might happen in the future is a great opportunity. I will say, to your point, Janet, it's tough. The world is different. The COVID pandemic tragedy, is really a terrific example of something I can't quite explain, which is that you could define and look at and chart out a course of action that is relatively straightforward and leads to you living, and then another course of action that is not particularly easier or more desirable or attractive, but leads to you dying. And hundreds of thousands of people would take that second course to their demise. I can't explain how that's beyond my comprehension. And so I think it's really a challenge for us to figure that out and to try to get around it as we see it unfolding before our eyes.
Indeed, yeah. Mm-hmm. I want to build on.
I want Concafa's applause, too.
President Draco.
I'll just leave that. I'll leave the cheering. Sorry, shameless.
Your comments about your thought process during your thinking about taking the job are a good segue to the next couple of questions I want to ask, because they're around leadership. And you all come from very diverse backgrounds and have a lot of wisdom to share, especially with some of our students and prospective leaders who may be in the audience. So my first question about leadership, if someone wanted to become a UC president, and I hesitate to ask this question, one day, what kind of career route should they take? What are the leadership qualities they should have? And no, it's not what you're thinking. But I would like to hear the answer.
One of you should answer.
Yeah, well, Gary, here, I would say, Gary, you should probably, that's if I'm hearing it correctly. Mark, I think you and I talked about this at one time. When people ask me, I think I'd like to be president of a university, what should I do? I say, you're probably not suited for it, is what I mean. I think it's not something to want to do. I think you do your job, be your best, have it work out, and then the job sort of finds you. But I think if you look at it from the outside as, boy, that looks like something I want to do, you probably don't understand it, and you're probably not so well suited for it. So I think doing your job the best you can and having that pathway open, you'd be would you say, gosh, I should be a governor and a Homeland Security Secretary first? You wouldn't, you wouldn't say that was something you ought, you would, as a governor, you want to be the best governor you could be. When you were serving the administration and the country, you wanted to do the best you could at doing that. And people call you and doors open and you flow forward. And I think that's the way it should be.
I completely agree with Michael. I was always amazed at which mail I did open and didn't open, which ones I responded to and not. And I think it's a mistake to try to plan your trajectory to become the University of California president or the governor of Arizona. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense. Do what it makes you happy. Do what you're good at. Try to be very good. And whether that, is coding for, a firm, or whether it's a lawyer or a physician or whatever it is, and just see what happens. I'm always skeptical, when I had students come into my office in their second year of law school, planning what they were going to do as a tax lawyer 30 years out. I mean, it just didn't make any sense to me. Life is too contingent, and you don't know enough about it. Mm-hmm. So I agree, Michael, you got it exactly right. We figured that one out, sir.
All right.
I do want to say one thing, which is, particularly for the students in the audience, is really invest in yourself, in your education. Put energy into it. It doesn't matter what your major is or what have you, but this is really a time to build your human capital. And your human capital is what allows you to, as you meet different contingencies and different opportunities present themselves, et cetera, allow you to capitalize on those.
Can I say, just to make sure, I'm going to echo that and say, for students, I didn't mean it's like easy or you coast. It means you work hard and try to do the best you can so that as opportunities present themselves to you, you're able to take advantage of those opportunities and move forward. So it is continually pushing forward. It's just not having a specific, gee, I think I'd like to do that only outcome. Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
One of the things that's key in reaching any leadership role is mentoring, role models. I wonder if you could share with our audience who were your role models or mentors and helped you to get to your leadership role.
I'll start. When I graduated from law school, I got a clerkship with a judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit, whose chambers were in Phoenix. That's how I got to Arizona. Her name is Mary Schroeder. And so when you're a law clerk for a judge, chambers are small. There's usually 2 or maybe 3 law clerks, and you work very closely with your judge for a year, and then you move on, and the next group of clerks comes in. And if you're lucky, as I was, you develop a relationship with your judge that becomes a lifelong relationship. And I ultimately ended up deciding to remain in Phoenix. I didn't know a soul there when I moved there. 25 years later, I was the governor. Things happen. I ultimately joined the law firm that she had practiced in and practiced at that firm for almost 10 years. And then the next opportunity came my way. But Judge Schroeder was a key mentor for me.
A couple of, I think of 3. And I think it would be true for all of us, we'd say, that our parents and our families led us forward a lot. That was critical from the beginning. I learned a lot from my parents, learned a lot from my children, really in growing forward. So those things were very important to me. I'd say I had a couple of particular mentors in medical school, in particular, few here and there. 4th grade teacher who was good, and et cetera. But Holly Smith was a professor of medicine when I was in medical school, who was a mentor for decades, nicely. A man named Jim O'Donnell, who I want to mention and honor. It was an ophthalmologist and really took me under his wing. I'll say a story about that for the students here, is that Jim was a sailor, so he spoke in very clear language of the type that you would use sometimes aboard ship, but he could really communicate things, and I appreciated that. And he found me early on as I was a student and sort of helped by giving me things to do and then liked it when I did well. And so he was really kind of holding an arm out and lifting me up and helping me to be a faculty member along with him. I worked in his lab, we were faculty members together. And he gave me advice, and some of his advice were things that he couldn't quite do himself. But I was able to follow those things, and I saw us kind of catch up, and then actually my career began to do a little better than his. And what I remember is that happened, the better I did, the more he applauded and lifted me up. It was really quite touching. And so I just remember that so much, that you want to bring people, and then if you do a great job of it, you can push them beyond you, and appreciate that.
Yeah, it's embarrassing for me to answer. My mother, with 102, was the most influential person in my life. And, but I think I'm a cranky contrarian. You may have noticed that. I think I looked around me and said, I could do that job better, or why is that going so badly? And those were my anti-role models that I tried to follow.
I've actually said that to people as well. I want to talk about your the accomplishment that you had as president that you're most proud of, and for President Drake, maybe what kind of legacy you'd like to leave as president, if you've thought about that.
Yeah, I'm pleased, honestly, if we were to take this moment and say, let's look at the effect of COVID-19 on the university communities at all 10 campuses over these last 10 years, I'd be proud of that. So I think that's something that everybody worked on together, but I think we all did a good job of that. I'm pleased that we are seeing more diversity, following again in the footsteps of my colleagues, that we're having a pathway toward debt-free education, so we'll work on that and see how that works as we go forward. I'm excited about the progress we're making on climate change, want to get to more progress there. I'm very pleased and excited at the progress we've made on our moving toward a broader campus safety, a broader concept of campus safety, and I think we have a chance to change that as we move forward. And legacy, great concept. You know, I am not yet at the place where I think about such a thing, so I'll just wait until we're done and try and keep moving forward.
Okay, great. Jan?
Well, I think we made progress, at the university, building on what Mark had done, what Mark's predecessors had done. We're all building on the shoulders of others, but progress in terms of affordability, accessibility, inclusiveness, diversity, all of those. We made progress on issues like sexual harassment and Title IX. We made progress on climate change. And those are all things that one could point to, but I think in terms of one episode that marks my time as president was our decision to sue the Trump administration for rescinding DACA. And we were the first party to sue. The case obviously went all the way to the Supreme Court, where we prevailed 5-4. Not sure the vote would come out the same today. I do think I'm the only cabinet secretary to have personally sued her successor. I will always remember the day the decision came down, and they post the decisions at 10 o'clock in the morning, D.C. time, and at 7:01 a.m. our time, the phone started ringing, and that was a good day as president.
Indeed. Yeah.
I've mentioned some things that have made me proud, but I guess the truth is, in 2008, 2009, I came to work every morning saying, during the Great Recession and more than $1 billion of cut from the state legislature, a retirement plan that I was told would go broke in 20 years or something like that that it was not all going to go south on my watch. This was the great University of California. We were not going to let our students down. We might charge them more. I didn't like it, but we did it. Hell, we even cut the faculty's pay. We cut my pay, which I really resented. But I think I felt that the main impulse was you've got to guard this, that there will be a Michael Drake, there'll be a Janet Napolitano, there'll be other faculty and other students, but we can't let this institution fail. And that's what I did. That's what I worked on.
You did a great
yeah.
job.
I do have to share just one, please.
Yeah.
One quick, I thought, funny anecdote about what Janet was proud of in suing the administration. I had just got here, and after the decision to rescind DACA came down, I wrote one of my statements that you may read occasionally, and it was fairly critical of the administration's decision. And my wife said, "Oh, you're going to be in trouble because you shouldn't have said that," and because I was coming from Georgia. And the next day, my boss was suing the administration, so I thought I would do okay. As we get close to the end of our time, I do have one question I would like to ask, a final question for each of our panelists. These last 2 years have been challenging for all of us, but as you look ahead now, what makes you optimistic about the future and hopeful for the future?
I'm being polite, but yeah.
Well, I suppose it's the great universities we have, but more than that, it's the talent across America and the ingeniousness of it all. I mean, of course, I can't work anything, electronically. I mean, it's all a mystery to me. But it's technology, it's creativity, and I think that is our future. I guess maybe you're hearing the silence because, like Janet and like Michael have said, I'm somewhat worried about the culture and what counts as truth and the search for truth. But I have a sort of confidence that the young people in America will get this right. And there's an enormous amount of talent, and they're always doing things that none of us expect. I remember once meeting Michael Dell, and he went to the University of Texas 1 year, and I said, "Michael, can you imagine how rich you'd be if you'd gone 4 years?" And, it was sort of my attitude. Maybe it was only 1 year, but we helped shape this guy, and he shaped my life by telling me what computers to use. And so I do have great hope. What does bother me a lot is the prevalent tribalism in the world and to some extent in our country. I just have to tell you, it worries me a lot.
So I keep thinking about the history of our country and the different periods we've been through, and how somehow we've always found a way forward. And it's a remarkable record of resilience, really, and that really depends on the talents of the people who are in the country. And when I look around the University of California, we shouldn't allow ourselves to get smug, but we should allow ourselves to take some pride in just the immense wealth of talent at the university, from students, from staff to faculty. It is a very it is the kind of community that in the end will, I think, help permit our country to keep moving forward.
Yeah, I'd agree very much. I was thinking as you were speaking of this campus and what this campus means to the community and then to the world, and thinking about this campus 50 years ago when you were a leader in multiple things, but not as many, that the diversity and inclusiveness that the campus has today are starkly different than the way things were a generation or 2 generations ago. And so the opportunity for people from different backgrounds to come and learn and leave and go into the world and help the world grow better are broader than they've ever been before. I had lunch with students visiting here in December, and it was incredible to look around the table and actually mention to them, had we sat at that same table 25 years before, the students sitting around a table would have looked entirely different. So the things that this community has done to create that opportunity and to allow people to move forward with the knowledge that they gain and create while they're here is something that's inspiring. And so I think we can continue to try to do that work. If we think about the last couple of years, COVID and the fact that the virus was discovered and then sequenced in January-ish of 2020, and then by January 2021, there were a series of vaccines. The vaccines, one study looked at these and thinks that the vaccines, even not used as widely as they should have been, saved about 1.1 million lives and about 11 million hospitalizations in this country in the year 2021. What a miracle that is to happen just in the first year. And then to think of the one that we mention most often, but there are others to think of the ability to use CRISPR-Cas9 therapy and things like eukaryotic cells and the promise that holds for the future, that those kinds of things that were only dreamt about. I mean, I'll use CRISPR-Cas9 as one example. I, as a medical student, one of the diseases we studied for interesting biochemistry, et cetera, was sickle cell anemia, and I did some counseling with the sickle cell patients at the time, and what I would tell them is there's no effective treatment, no cure. Here's how you can try to make a life that works for you. Today, now, a generation and a bit more, there is an actual cure that's available. That's through the miracles of science. So I think of the hope that we have to address those kinds of things, and really the role of the University of California in creating that opportunity and in making that science and being the exemplar of those best practices to continue to lift our communities forward.
Thank you for that, and I agree completely. And again, I just want to thank Presidents Drake, Napolitano, and Udolph for joining us here today. I know everyone is so busy all the time, and it really means a lot to me personally, and I think to our university and our audience that you took time out of your schedules to be with us. So thank you again for being part of the panel and for creating such a thoughtful dialogue with us today. I'd also, go ahead. I would also like to thank you, our audience, for attending. I hope you enjoyed this discussion and look forward to seeing you again at the next colloquium. Stay tuned for the next one, which will occur in spring quarter. And I'm not going to tell you what it's going to be. You're going to have to stay in suspense for a little while. But thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you all. Good to see you.